book lovers! I know I am super late, but we're here to talk about all the books that I read in July. And the reason why I'm a bit later to the party for my July wrap up is that I got really badly sick at at the end of July and then the beginning of August, and I feel like I'm just really getting back to my normal self. And I'm so glad to be back and also finally talk about the books I read in July because, guys, I went on a journey and I just can't wait to tell you about it. Also, I have to pick up my friend from the train station in a little bit, so I might not get through all of the books before that and have to do the rest afterwards. But let's start with the statistics. So I read 13 books in July, and one of them was a novella, and one of them I read as an audiobook. That was when I was sick and couldn't even read anymore, so I listened to one of the books. And counting together all the pages, I read over, I think, 5,100 pages. My average rating was 3.88, which isn't bad at all. And I can already tell you I had one 5-star read and 2 or 3 very close ones. Genre-wise, I feel like I read a lot of different ones. I only read 2 contemporary romances, but you will see I read 6 dark romances and 1 like sci-fi romance, and then I also read 1 general fiction, so a nice variety. And only 2 out of the 13 books were actual standalones, the rest were all part of a series. What I'm also very proud of, I read 4.5 books from my July TBR, and that is the highest number I got so far, which, you know, we have to celebrate the little accomplishments. And I say 4.5 because I started 1 but I haven't finished it in July. Now that we talked about the statistics, let's talk about the books. And the first one that I read, and I feel like now it feels like such a long time ago that I read this book. I was actually on vacation with my mom and I read Ellen Hildebrand, The Hotel Nantucket. This was my first Ellen Hildebrand book, and I had this on my 2024 TBR list, and I heard great things about her books, especially for the summertime, and I get it now. Like, this was such an enjoyable and fun read, especially when you're on vacation, and especially with this one when you're like in a hotel or something. You just enhance that vacation feeling. This is general fiction, and I think what I really like about this is that it is very much about the good feelings, and the whole time I was like, oh my god, are we gonna have like a breaking point? And not that there's anything wrong or bad if that happens in a book, but sometimes, especially when I want just a easy read, I don't need to go and like see the breakpoints of all people or need to have this really heavy topics that, you know, can turn into more sad stories. There's always a time and place for that, and those books also make beautiful stories, but I don't always need to have them. And I feel like this book was just right. Like, of course we still had conflicts and there was stuff happening, but it was never in a way where I was like, oof, this is too heavy, I don't want to go on. And I really appreciated this. So you follow several people over the summer and they all work or are connected to the Hotel Nantucket. And the Hotel Nantucket is brand new, or at least they want to reopen it. And it is this like really rich person who comes in and says he wants to open the Hotel Nantucket to impress 2 women. And he only tells Lisbeth, who's going to be the hotel manager, about one of the women. And that is a very critical hotel reviewer. And she never gave 5 keys out to any other hotel, but the guy, I forgot his name, that invested into this hotel has the mission to earn the first 5-star or 5-key review. Basically, you follow Lisbeth and all these other characters trying to make this hotel the best experience for their guests. You also have the guests that you follow and all these different relationships, and you feel like some of them are hiding secrets. And then there's also this mystery whether or not there's a ghost in this hotel, and I don't know, it's just such a fun, enjoyable read, and definitely one I would recommend. I gave this 4 stars, and you guys, you know what this book really showed me? How much of a romance reader I actually am. Not to say that this book wasn't good, but we had, I think, even more than 1 kind of romance in here. I'm not quite sure, but there was one that I considered like one of the more main plots, and I just wanted that couple's book. I was like, oh my god, give me more of them. Like, every time they were on, I was like, yes, I really love the storyline, and I would have loved just a book of them. Yeah, I feel like this has a lot of ingredients that a lot of people would love. Then a very anticipated read for me was Beach Read by Emily Henry. This was the only book by Emily Henry that I haven't read yet. It is called Beach Read. I wanted to wait for a summer vacation or just the summer in general to read it, and I also took this with my mom when we were on vacation, and this book is great. I mean, I heard a lot of great things about it, so I was expecting a lot. And I will say, rating wise, I think this was a bit difficult because if you would have told me this was general fiction or if it was marketed as that, I feel like in that term, I would definitely give it a 5 star. But since this is considered romance and it was marketed as romance, I gave this a 4.5. But yeah, as like general fiction, definitely a 5 star read, or as women fiction, whatever you want to call it. But as a romance, it's more of a 4.5. But still, that is amazing. So I'm not saying that this was bad in any way. I felt very connected to the characters. I think Emily Henry is just incredible at making characters feel so real. So in this one you have Gus and August, and they're both authors. They know each other from uni and they've been kind of enemies or nemesis, and they turn out to be neighbors when she moves into her dad's condo, and she deals with a lot of grief in more than one way actually. Her dad died a few months ago and she just has a hard time right now writing happily ever after. And since they're both authors and they get to talking, they make this bet that they would try to write the genre of the other person. So Gus writes general fiction, and there's just so much to this book and to this story, and I think a lot of people will enjoy this. Emily Henry is just a very good author. Like, her writing style is just really easy to approach, but it's also at the same time a bit more elevated, I would say. And one thing I want to shortly go in is, and maybe that's also a little reason why it's not a 5 star as romance. So there was this sentence that I heard about before going into that was a quote where I was like, oh, this guy must be so amazing. And you know, it's a thing that a fictional character would say to his woman. And since I knew that quote, I couldn't wait for him to say it. But the thing is, when I got to that part, or I mean, it was even early on, it wasn't even his words. I mean, she put the words out there beforehand, and then he basically just repeated them at the right moment. And it was still cute, but I feel like it kind of lost a bit of meaning because he didn't come up with them, she did. And maybe you don't know what I'm talking about, but I'm sure when you read it or even saw some other reviews, for example, Destiny's review of this book, then you might know what I'm talking about. I just don't want to spoil anything from this book. And that's sometimes the trouble when you know certain quotes beforehand and then you make your own assumptions or expectations around them, and yeah, it is different in the book in the end. And yeah, just quickly had to mention that because that kind of bothered me just the tiniest bit. Next up, I read Reckless by Lauren Roberts, and this was also very highly anticipated. This is the second book in the Powerless universe, and I mean, the first book ended in a way where I just couldn't wait to get into this one. And we got the novella in between Powerful, and Powerful just really showed me how much I also like her writing. So it's not just about the story, but I love the way Lauren Robert writes. Yeah, I just really like her dialogues in particular, I think, and the way the characters think about each other. In terms of the story, I think she already said that this is kind of the breather book in between, and I definitely agree with it. I gave this book 4 stars. I loved it, I devoured it, it was great, but it was also lacking a bit of maybe almost tension, I would say. And it's weird because I'm someone who loves to have more of a romance, even in fantasy, because I'm a romance reader, and this definitely delivered on the romance, but it took away from the overall story, and we also didn't get that much further with the romance, I would say. This also continues right where we were left off from the first book, which I really appreciated. And I think she introduced some plot lines from the first book that she just mentioned here, but it never went anywhere. And I feel like if this is a breather book, then you can also implement these other storylines and make them bigger, and you don't have to have the big reveal in here if you wanted to have the breather book, but still feed onto these other storylines, because right now I feel like the people she met in the first book, the rebellions kind of, that whole storyline that was introduced in the first book felt like it was mentioned here so we don't forget, but it didn't go anywhere. And just certain other things, because we also got another POV in here, and I feel like it's the same with that one, that we had that there and it was mentioned, but it didn't drive us anywhere. I don't know if that makes sense. I guess what I'm trying to say is that there were a lot of pretty words in here, but it didn't really drive the story anywhere, and I would have loved to have more of that and not just focus so much on Peyton and Kai and their banter, which was great. I mean, I loved them. I feel like I'm complaining a lot, but in the end of the day, I love this book. I love this series in general. I love these characters. It was just lacking in some departments and I would have wanted more, but I'm guessing we get all of that in the third book. I'm very excited. So guys, now we're coming to the part where I feel like I dived into a genre, into a series, and just immersed myself with it. And it was difficult to come up for air after that one. And it all started with A God of Malice by Rena Kent. And I can't even tell you guys what made me pick that one up. I feel like I didn't really know what to read, and it was on my Kindle, and I was like, let's just do it. And wow, I'm not really a dark romance girly, and I feel like all the dark romances I read in the past were kind of light gray. It wasn't really that dark, but that series, the Legacy of God series, it is dark, and it's not apologizing for it, which I really appreciated. And also what I liked is that, first of all, you have the author's note, so you kind of do know from the beginning where you go into. But even then, when you read the first chapter or the first 2 chapters, you know what you're in for. So if it's not for you, then you just stop after the first 2 chapters and you don't have to go through all the book just to find out it's not for you, because I wouldn't recommend this just to anyone. This is dark, dark romance and not everyone will love it, which I get, and then just don't read it. But if you're unsure and you want to try, read the first few chapters. You will know how dark this gets, and if you know and you're okay with it, enjoy the ride. Enjoy the journey, because these books are just freaking entertaining. In general, I'll just talk a bit about the series before I go into each book. I would say that these books don't really even feel like romances. I mean, there's obsession and intense feelings, but it's not really romantic in any way. And I feel like once you know that and you just enjoy it for what it is, it's just such a fun time. And also, I think it was quite educating at some points, because these books are spicy as hell, and all these kings these people are into, I was like, wow. There is so much out there. I don't know, I just thought these books were super entertaining, and I rated the first book 4 stars, and the first book kind of gave me the direction these books would go into, and I was sure that, none of these books will be a 5-star read, because there's just, there's still like dark romance, but to me it wasn't really a romance, or like, at the end of the day, it was just not my idea of love. So I didn't really see myself ever connecting to one of these books and be like, oh, it's a 5-star read. But I don't mind that. Like, I still enjoyed the books for what they were. And also I read these 6 books within a week. So I myself was quite the obsessive one when it comes to this series. And I didn't even know that I would read the whole series, especially in such a short amount of time. But the thing is that these people are all so interconnected. And in the first book, when certain people were mentioned, I wanted their book immediately. But the ones that I really wanted to read were, unfortunately, the ones from the very last book. So I was like, am I just going to skip to that? Or am I going to read all the 4 books in between? I was like, yeah, let's read all the 4 books in between to get to the one that I really want to read. And I'm so glad I decided to do that. And there was even a slight moment where I thought, should I go back and actually read the other books with the parents, and I think even the grandparents? Because these are like the last books of the whole Rena Kent universe, and you definitely feel that when you read the books, because there are even certain POVs from the parents, and it's just, there's so much of their backstory that you just know that, okay, these people are not just side characters, but they are actual like main characters in their own books. And I think if you're a fan of the whole Rena universe, if you've read all these books, like, wow, like the Legacy of God series must mean so much to you. I mean, to me, they were already quite amazing. But I mean, if you read them as like the end of this whole universe with so many characters, I mean, I don't know, how many books are there in this universe? Like 20 or something? That's also the reason why I decided against to read all the parents and grandparents stories. But also, I don't love to read about the kids from certain characters. It's usually something I stay away from, because, if you want to make 4 interesting characters, they need to have some kind of, problems or some kind of trauma, something they have to deal with. And usually these types of things are rooted from the way you grew up. And then you have to kind of make the parents do something that isn't incredible. And I feel like that was definitely the way in these books. That's not necessarily bad, but it just made me kind of hold off to read the parents' books. Because also, I feel like especially the dads, they just didn't really give a fuck about their kids, to be honest. I'm sorry, but they were so obsessed with their wives. Right, so I just picked up my friend who is currently my live audience, but I think I stopped where I talked about the parents and that I don't always love to read about the kids. But since I didn't read the parents' books, I think it was great to just read the kids. And it's an amazing dark romance series. And I also really loved the aspect that it was all set in university, so you have like the college feeling. And first I kind of thought, like, these books are entertaining, but they're also to some aspect like almost ridiculous. I mean, the first guy in the book is, I think, 19. Talked like he was 30. It was just really funny to me when I saw that he was actually 19. I do have a reading vlog for the last book in the series, the one that I really anticipated. So I won't go into too much detail in that one. And I think in general, I will give you my rating. I'll give you the rating in order how I would rate them. And I want to go into the specifics. So the ones on the lower end are God of Pain and then God of Ruin. I liked God of Pain, which is the second one. The first half was great, but I don't know what happened with the second one. That was just too out there, too crazy. Again, also going with the theme that these are all very young people. And I feel like his plan at the end was just very short-sighted. Also, that book made me want to read the parents' book the most because it was almost an intricate part of that story. And I think if you read the parents' books, then you will really enjoy that book maybe. And God of Ruin, I think, was just, out of all of them, not really anything new. And I don't know, I just connected the least with these two characters. So I was almost a bit bored with that book, I would say. So I gave both of them the same rating, like 2.75, and would put them on the bottom. After that, I unfortunately would put God of War, which is my book that I was anticipating the most. I'm not going to talk about it too much because I have a reading vlog coming up for that one. But yeah, I expected so much more. Let's just leave it at that. But I think the book afterwards would be God of Malice, that I gave 4 stars. And yeah, that was just a great entry to the series. I really, really liked it. Again, definitely not what I think love is or should be, but it's not really about that. To me, it was about the entertainment, and this book was freaking entertaining. And the book that topped that was God of Wrath, and I'm such a big Cicely and Jeremy stan. Oh my god, I freaking loved them. I loved their dynamics. I really loved her individually. The same with him. I think they just worked amazingly well together. And then the top contender, my favorite book, and the book that proved me wrong because I for sure thought I wouldn't give one of them a 5-star rating, is God of Fury. And hands down, one of the best books I read all year. Definitely a 5-star rating. This book was so incredible. It was so deeply emotional, and I would say it was also the least dark out of all of them, and I think she even said that in her author's note at the beginning. And maybe that was the thing that was missing from the other books, where I thought, it's not really about that much about the romance. But with God of Fury, it was so emotional. It was definitely about love. I enjoyed both characters so much. I think they just deserve the best. It's also, I think, her first male-male romance, and wow, she should write more of them. She's incredible at it, and I cried so much in that book. I think it just broke my heart, but it also put it back together in the best way. And yeah, definitely deserving of that 5-star rating. And also, after these 6 books, after that journey into Rina Kent's universe, into the dark romance genre, I didn't even know what to read anymore afterwards, because I felt like reading a normal romance after that type of obsession, of love, of intense feelings, like, you can't just go back into contemporary romance. So I actually needed a few days where I picked up a few things and just nothing really felt right. I was definitely in, I don't know, maybe like a book hangover from that series. It was just, yeah, I just needed some time. But another great book actually came out in July that was Play Along by Liz Tomford, and I love Liz Tomford's writing. I think her Windy City series is amazing. I gave the book a 4.75, I think, and maybe it would have been a 5-star read if I haven't read it after my little dark romance era, because as I said, like, it's hard to then go back to a normal contemporary romance. it's different. So maybe it was that, but overall, definitely 100% recommend. I think Liz Tomford is especially incredible in writing fictional men. These men that are so obsessed with their woman, and there are so many details in their love languages, how they see their woman. I don't know. I think it just all adds up to an amazing love story. And it was also a kind of forced or fake marriage. I mean, the storyline is that they get married in Vegas, and if they would admit that it was a drunken mistake, then she would lose her job. And obviously they don't want that, so they stay married in order for her to keep the job, but she's applying meanwhile for another one. And I think maybe that was also one of the storylines that I didn't love. Like the whole aspect about her job, that was one of the plot lines, that she was way overqualified for the job because she had a shitty ass boss, basically, who was just misogynistic, sexist. And I don't love to read about these things. Obviously, I know these are real life problems, but especially that she didn't want to complain about it, or that she didn't want anyone else saying something about that. I just hated that whole thing because everyone knew that in the team. And especially when you see how it ended, I was like, yeah, I just don't love it. But also, I actually read Play Along for the same reading vlog, so you see more of my thoughts in that one. And the next book I read after that one, I also read for that reading vlog. And maybe by these books, you might guess what type of reading vlog I did. But that was Imagine Me by Tara Murphy. And that particular book is the last one in the Shatter Me series. And guys, I just have a hard time saying goodbye to characters where there's at least 4 or 5 books. In this case, it was 6. And you went on this incredible journey with them, and then it's just over. And I really didn't want to finish the book or like even start it, but it was really, really good. It wasn't, I think, the best way how to end it. I feel like certain things were missing, so it was a 4-star read for me. And I think especially at the end, somehow it was kind of abrupt to me. Like, I read the last page, I turned the page, and I couldn't believe that it was actually the last page. Like, afterwards you had the epilogue, but I don't know, I feel like I needed some more context, or some, just like another chapter where they would, I don't know, maybe jump ahead a little bit, like the epilogue. But I feel like the epilogue was more or less just to give us a proper ending for the love story that we went on for these 6 books. But I wanted more details about their future in general, like more of the political side. Again, in the reading vlog, you'll get more of my thoughts on that. And one thing that I definitely also, why am I not showing you the book? I have it here. So yeah, I read Imagine Me by Tara Murphy. The other books I read on my Kindle. I think that's why I forgot that I actually have the physical copy. But obviously, after finishing this, I had to go into the final novella and read Believe Me, which is the final book of everything. And I'm actually glad that it just exists in general, because there was something missing in here that definitely was satisfied by Believe Me, and I'm very, very glad. If we didn't have Believe Me, maybe this wouldn't even have been 4 stars, to be honest. But we do have them both, and I absolutely love the series. I definitely recommend it, and if you want to try it out and think these 6 books are just too much of a commitment, do it the way I did it. You can also just read the first 3 separate. You don't have to read the rest of it. The first 3 books stand on their own, and once you're at the 3rd book, you will want to read the other ones. But it just is less intimidating to say, just read the first 3 and you don't have to read 6 books for a series, you know? And with that, we already come to my last book of the month. By the end of the month, I was already so sick that reading was difficult. I didn't even have energy to read. And when I don't have energy to read, then you know I'm proper sick. So I actually took some advice from one of you guys, because one of you wrote in the comments that the whole Ice Planet Barbarian series is actually on Audible for free to listen to. And I thought, why not read or listen to one of these books? So I listened to the 3rd one, Barbarian Lover, and they're all by Ruby Dixon. They're sci-fi romances between aliens and humans that landed on that ice planet. I gave it 3 stars. I mean, I don't really expect a lot out of these books, you know? They're entertaining, they're really spicy. And I think what I do like is that they all, like, you have to read them in order, so you can't just read in between books because they all go on with the timeline basically. I like that they're all a bit different, but yeah, I don't really expect a lot of them. They're entertaining, they're there, but they're not really something where I'm like, oh my god, going crazy about them. If you want to try them, like, read the first book, maybe they're for you. They're just a very fun and easy time. So with that, we finally have my very late July wrap up. Thank you for waiting so long, and I'll definitely now get back into filming more. The next video is already in the making. It's that reading vlog that, yeah, write in the comments what you think it will be. I feel like you can tell by the books that I told you that I read for the video. And other than that, give this video a like and also subscribe for more bookish content, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!